It's now over a month since the United Nations Security Council passed Resolution 1973, calling on the international community to take all necessary action to protect civilians in Libya. NATO has been in full command of operations to enforce that historic resolution for almost 3 weeks, and we are fulfilling our UN mandate. NATO's kept up a high operational tempo. Allied aircraft have flown well over 2,800 missions, an average of just over 1,000 a week, almost half of them strikes. We've struck a broad range of targets: tanks and rocket launchers, armoured vehicles and ammunition sites. We're keeping up the pressure on the Gaddafi regime forces to stop their brutal onslaught against civilians. It's a challenging task, but we're making significant progress in weakening Gaddafi's ability to use his military machine against his own people. That operational tempo has been matched by a high political tempo. Last week, as you know, NATO foreign ministers met in Berlin with our operational partners and reinforced the political impetus behind Operation Unified Protector. They restated full support for the mission. They committed to providing all the resources necessary to do the job, and they agreed that they will do so until all attacks on civilians have stopped, until all of Gaddafi's forces, including his snipers, mercenaries and paramilitary forces, have returned to bases, and until there is full, safe and unhindered humanitarian access to all people in need of assistance. There was also wide consensus on the role of the contact group in finding a political solution to the crisis. The ministers strongly endorsed the outcome of the first meeting of the contact group in Doha, in particular the call for Colonel Gaddafi to leave power. And they stressed the need to continue to coordinate closely with other international actors. As you know, the EU was represented in Berlin by the High Representative Cathy Ashton and her staff. So NATO and its partners are united, we are determined, and we're focused. We're doing what the UN has mandated and will continue to do so for as long as it takes. I will now hand over to Brigadier General Mark van Uhm, the Director of the Strategic Operations Centre at SHAPE, who will give you a more detailed picture of recent operations in Misrata and across Libya. Brigadier.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Let me start with a short overview of the arms embargo and the no-fly zone. The arms embargo is proving to be comprehensive and effective. As far as naval support is concerned, there still are 18 vessels in the command of the Allied Maritime Command in Naples. Complemented by fighter jets and radar aircraft, these ships actively patrol the central Mediterranean. Since the operation started, 422 vessels have been hailed and 10 boardings have been conducted. No violation of the arms embargo has been reported. The no-fly zone is still in effect. We have continued enforcing the no-fly zone, and we have not seen any violation by fixed-wing aircraft since last week. Now I would like to update you on NATO operations to protect the civilian population and the impact NATO is having on the ground. In most parts of Libya, the situation on the ground is still fluid, dynamic and changing constantly. NATO's actions are part of a concerted campaign to degrade Gaddafi's regime's capability to harm civilians, not only now in Misrata and Ajabia, but in the long run across the whole country. We are steadily degrading his command and control capability and his ability to sustain forces on the ground. We are maintaining a high operational tempo, and we adjust our operations on a daily basis against what is clearly a rapidly changing environment on the ground. You will now see a video sequence to illustrate what I'm about to describe. Over the last few days, our aircraft destroyed many ammunition bunkers, tanks, defense radars, rocket launchers, and other military equipment. Most of these targets destroyed were targets deployed around Misrata, Zitan, and Ajdabiya. Last night, we conducted deliberate multiple strikes against command and control facilities of the Gaddafi regime, including communications infrastructure and the 32nd Brigade headquarters, located 10 kilometers south of Tripoli. Over the last 36 hours, beginning on Sunday evening, these communication nodes were the focus of a coordinated series of strikes aimed at degrading Gaddafi's ability to command and direct his forces. The effectiveness of the strikes is shown in these 3 video clips. And as you can see on the video, that we take out the command and control facilities, and the antenna is still there. So that's precision. Still, nothing indicates that Gaddafi has any intention of disengaging from operations. His forces continue to engage and continue to use heavy weapons in civilian areas. Therefore, we, NATO, will continue to mount offensive strike missions until we have a clear signal that civilians are no longer under threat. Now towards the situation in Masrata. We have been watching the situation in Masrata closely over the past 10 days, and the fighting between Gaddafi regime and opposition forces has been intense. In Misrata, the situation on the ground is also fluid, with ground being won and lost by both sides alternately. Gaddafi's forces have shelled and rocketed Misrata indiscriminately, causing death and injury and widespread damage to homes. In addition, the seaport has effectively been closed a few times due to repeated shelling by regime forces and fighting in the area. Our forces have conducted numerous strikes against Gaddafi forces in and around Misrata. We have destroyed over 40 tanks and several armored fighting vehicles. In addition, several anti-aircraft weapon systems have been destroyed, enabling our aircraft to operate more effectively in the Misrata area. Just last night, our pilots observed mobile rocket launchers firing on Misrata, and they destroyed them. In the same night, our pilots also struck advancing armored vehicles. But there is a limit to what can be achieved with air power to stop fighting in a city. We are taking every precaution to avoid causing civilian casualties by our own air operations. What we are doing is attacking the regime's ability to supply and sustain these attacks in the long run, not just in the area of Misrata, but across the country. Since the beginning of the operation, NATO and its partners have flown more than 2,800 sorties, including almost 1,200 strike missions, which represents over 40% of the total sorties flown. So there's a good balance between, on the one hand, enforcing the no-fly zone, and on the other hand, interdicting the forces which threaten the civilian population in Libya. Finally, something about humanitarian assistance. We have established procedures to ease the passage of humanitarian flights and shipping. And we have seen a steady increase in the level of humanitarian assistance activity into Libya. We are keeping track of the United Nations efforts to minimize the problematic humanitarian situation in Misrata. Since the beginning of the operation, a total of 73 movements of humanitarian assistance have been executed or are momentarily in execution. 37 via the air, 22 via sea, and 14 via ground. Of the 22 maritime movements, 19 ships went to Misrata to deliver humanitarian assistance. Momentarily, 10 maritime and 3 ground movements are in execution. This includes 6 ships that are busy evacuating people out of Misrata. This ends my opening statement, and I'm happy to take any questions you may have.